Welcome to The Athletic live in New Orleans, coming to you guys from the Toyota studio here at Radio Row. I am Robert Mays. Joining me today, it is my co-host here at The Athletic Football Show, Derrik Klassen. Derrik, how you feeling, man?
I'm doing good. You told me earlier when we were doing this show early in the week how much it actually ramps up. I walked in here today and I was like, oh, it's buzzing everywhere.
David Njoku was walking around shirtless for like an hour.
It was hard to miss.
It's Thursday at Radio Row. Before we get into today's show, which, again, some great interviews lined up. We got Eli Manning coming on to talk about the Hall of Fame. We'll hear from Puka Nacua talking about receivers, the Cooper Kupp trade. If you could, please subscribe to the Athletic YouTube channel, the Athletic Football Show YouTube channel. Follow our podcast, Scoop City, the Athletic Football Show, wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to leave some comments, thoughts in the chat, we will hopefully be getting to those over the course of the show. I have a bone to pick with you, though. Last night, I invited you to dinner, okay? It was the dinner during this trip I was most excited about. You were going to come. You bowed out because long week, you weren't feeling great. I want to shame you about not coming. It's the best meal I've had in like 6 months.
I'm not even going to defend myself. When you told me what it was, like, I was extremely excited. Seafood, I'm a big seafood guy. I was very like, I need to go to this. As I got to the end of the workday, I realized I need an evening to settle down, make sure I can recuperate to get myself to Sunday.
You should feel bad about it.
It did work out, by the way. I do feel great today.
I feel even better. We went to a place called Mosquito Supper Club. It's like a supper club thing where you kind of sit with other people and they serve it family style. We sat down. There were some biscuits first, and then the second course was a plate of like pickled shrimp and fennel with like freshly baked bread. And then there was just a bowl of blue crab claws sitting in butter. As soon as I saw them put those on the table, I was like, this is going to be a transportive experience. And it is the best meal I've had in a really long time, and you should feel very bad that you missed it.
I'm positive it would have been the best meal I've had in a very long time. So I do feel bad about missing it. Not even going to defend myself.
I've done a good job so far. We're about a week in. I got here last Thursday, so I've been eating here for a week. And I don't feel overly disgusting. I feel like I should knock on wood because we still got a few days to go. But the fact that I've gotten this deep into it and I still feel like I can function as a person despite eating at least a stick of butter every single day, I'm actually pretty proud of myself for getting this far.
But see, you've got more reps doing this with
yeah.
Super Bowl. Some rookie mistakes.
We talked about this a little bit earlier today, how Mahomes is just unfazed by the moment because he's gotten so used to it. I am the Patrick Mahomes of overeating while I travel, and so there's really nothing that can shake me at this point.
I guess it's perfect that he's also here then.
We're going to have, and again, some really great interviews coming your way today. The first one that we want to get to, I don't think anyone would be surprised if the Niners were back in this game last year, considering the talent on that roster. A big part of that is Fred Warner and what he does for that defense. Our own Diana Rossini chatted with Fred Warner earlier today. Let's get to that conversation right now.
How did you help Christian McCaffrey battle through just what was obviously outrageously frustrating for him as he was doing everything he possibly could to get out there?
Yeah, Christian McCaffrey, you mentioned how that was the bulk of the talk, right? And rightfully so. This is the guy who is one of the best players in the league, you know, mentally and physically on the field for us, on and off. I think just talking with him, you know, just kind of keeping his mind right in the moments that he wasn't on the field, just making sure that, hey, man, you're going to get back, you're going to be ready to go. He did come back and versus that Buffalo Bills game, gets injured again. But before he gets injured, you're thinking like, man, this guy, he's having his best game of his season so far. This is where he takes off, and you know, obviously hurt his knee and everything. So it was just a tough year for him. I know he's got that fire in his belly right now. We've been texting back and forth. I know he's going to be ready to go next season.
Well, another person, the leader of your team, your head coach, Kyle Shanahan, always has that fire in his belly. What was he like this year? Because I felt like even from watching him from afar, he was on a roller coaster himself, trying to keep you guys together. Like, we're so close.
Yeah. I mean, it's so tough as a head coach. I could never imagine. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like I'm one of the head leaders of the team, and I try to keep the ship afloat, right? But he's the guy that, you know, we're all looking at week in and week out. And he does such a great job every week getting us prepared and getting us right. And at the end of the day, players got to go out there. Players got to win games. Players got to make plays. So, you know, that's kind of out of your control as a coach. But it's tough when you are losing games and you're not playing up to that standard that you know that you're accustomed to and that you've built and want to continue to see. So I know he's going to be fired up, ready to get us going this offseason.
All right, I'm done with the sad and the depressing stuff. The season's over. It's over. Let's turn this page,
Please,
all right?
yes.
So let's turn this page. It's fresh, right? It really starts now for you guys as you start thinking about what the 49ers are going to be. And you guys got some stuff to work out, right? This roster's got some contracts got to be adjusted and fixed, and you got to figure out what it's going to look like. But there's no question that Brock Purdy is the guy, that this is who the 49ers want. This deal is going to get worked on soon. What is it about Brock Purdy that maybe people outside of the 49ers, outside of that locker room, don't really understand what makes him so good?
Well, I mean, the thing is like if you truly watch the tape and you watch all the other elite quarterbacks in this league, they all have a common thread amongst all of them in the fact that they're able to process the game at such a high level, being able to create plays with their feet, make the high-level throws up and down the field. Brock Purdy does all these things, and he was in the MVP conversation a year ago. Like, let's not forget that. He took us to a Super Bowl, and he gave us the lead before, obviously, Patrick Mahomes and them took it away from us in that Super Bowl, right? So this is the guy. Like, there's no question. Everybody out there, if you have any questions about Brock Purdy, I'm here to tell you, I'm not biased. I know ball. He's the guy. Like, it's not. It's like.
Do you just want a Toyota? Is that what it is?
I do want a little bit of a Toyota too. Okay, I want Brock. All right, hook me up, brother. But
get him that Highlander.
But listen, this is by far the guy. He's such a great quarterback, such a great guy. You know, great leader for us. I'm excited for what's to come.
All right, so the Niners will be set with Brock at quarterback eventually at some point here in terms of the future of him. You got Robert Saleh back.
Yeah,
that's your guy.
Yeah.
You know, he's coming back to San Francisco after just an up and down experience as a head coach in New York, but obviously ready to get back in there.
Yeah.
In a space I think he's really comfortable in.
Yeah.
What are you looking forward to with having Robert back in the building?
Just getting back to playing dominant defense. That's all I've ever known since being here with the 49ers. You know, it's playing dominant defense for our team to ultimately give ourselves a chance to win the Super Bowl. And we weren't that last year. We haven't been just on the details of just how to be that, right? And so I think Coach Saleh, he knows that recipe, and I'm excited to get him back in and get back to work.
For Super Bowl coming up this Sunday, I mean, it's wild to think you guys were just playing in this thing.
Yeah.
You know, and just how different this is. But either way, you got the Chiefs back in this thing. In terms of the defenses, better unit. The Eagles or the Chiefs? Put me on the spot.
No, I know.
Because I know they're both different in their own way.
They're both different. I have such admiration and respect for both, obviously, the players and coaches, Spagnuolo and Fangio, the things that they've been able to do for both teams. I don't know if I can say one's better than the other, but what I am looking forward to is the matchup between both sides. Obviously, the Eagles' defense stopping Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, versus the Chiefs' defense stopping Saquon Barkley, right?
What is the plan? Like, if you're with the Chiefs right now,
Yeah.
what do you do? Like, if you're in the room with Spags, you're going, all right, how are we going to stop Saquon Barkley? Like, how do you stop him?
I wish I knew. Obviously, everybody wishes they knew because everybody had that same game plan going against them, and nobody was able to stop him. So, if they do stop him, obviously that gives them the best chance to win.
And for Patrick, how do you stop 15?
That's another one I'm still searching for.
I know. No one seems to have. I feel like you guys have little blips of figuring it out, but he's finding ways around it.
You got to win the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
You know, teams talk about, hey, let's start fast. Let's get off to a fast start. And in the Super Bowl and with this guy, you got to finish fast.
Yeah.
You got to finish faster. Because those moments are the crucial ones. When the game's tight, who's going to be on it? Who's going to make that one play to knock a ball loose or pick a ball off?
I'm curious to see if the Chiefs actually, and I've never said this about the Chiefs before, if they're going to be able to keep up offensively with the Eagles. Because I just think this is going to be a high-scoring game. Yeah. And we haven't had to see the Chiefs really score that many points this year.
They always score one more than the other team.
Always.
Right? Yeah.
Always. Just one more right at the end. I sound like I'm a Chief hater. I'm not. Look at the pants.
So Diana and Fred Warner finished that conversation talking about the teams in this Super Bowl, and we've had a couple weeks to sit in this, and I think that we know about the Chiefs' fatigue. We know that there were some people when the matchup, we found out what it was, weren't that excited about it. I want to spend some time here over the next couple minutes talking about why we should be excited for this Super Bowl. You and I earlier today, we did our big Super Bowl preview on the Athletic Football Show. You can go listen to that wherever you get your podcasts overnight into Friday. If you're thinking about the reasons to get up for this game, the thing you're most looking forward to about Chiefs-Eagles, what would it be?
I think if you really love the sport, you should always be able to get up for history potentially being made, and Patrick Mahomes has a very obvious chance to do that. Well, not just Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, Andy Reid is going to be able to solidify himself with potentially a three-peat. Like, it's never been done before. And really, I know our producer, Michael Beller, was looking at this like when we were talking about it a couple weeks ago. There haven't even been that many chances where teams have done it. Like the Dolphins, I think, in the 70s had lost one and then went back-to-back. But there was never a chance where a team won two and then got a third opportunity. Like, this is just, I understand we're all tired of Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. I understand all of that. But now that we're here, just appreciate what it is.
Just the mindless eating machine feel to what the Chiefs are right now. You know when you see a shark and it just looks like it has absolutely no emotions, like it's just a pure killing machine in a prehistoric way, in an unthinking way? That's what the Chiefs feel like right now. They're just a machine. And the words that we used when we were talking about them earlier today, there's like a calm and a discipline to what this team is in the biggest moments. And that's what makes them so scary. It isn't about you raising your game to reach theirs. It's about you not getting shaken in the moment. And the Josh Allen example from the AFC Championship game to me is the perfect thing to point to. Josh Allen was the calmest, most put-together version of him we have ever seen over the course of this season. And then he's going up against Patrick Mahomes in Arrowhead in the AFC Championship game. And you could feel, rattled is a strong word, but you could feel how rattled he was at the beginning of that game. And so being able to match just the steady heartbeat that they bring to these moments, that becomes the challenge, and that we're going to see if the Chiefs can, or the Eagles can actually make that happen.
And honestly, to that point, obviously the Eagles lost the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, but it probably does help that a number of those guys did play in that game. Obviously, a lot of the young pieces on the defense, or even guys that they brought in like Zach Bond did not, but a lot of the offense, it's a lot of the same guys. And even though Spags is going to give you a game no matter what, it probably does help that a lot of those guys have been in this moment before. They at least know what it feels like against this team specifically.
The one aspect of this matchup that I keep coming back to is just that feel of what the Eagles' defense is against an offense like this. And the Eagles just have this kind of anaconda constrictor-like feel to their defense, as I throw out more animal metaphors about this game. And the Chiefs are an offense that is comfortable playing that way, right? The Eagles are going to make you slowly move the ball down the field. They're going to limit explosives. And it's all about, are you going to be able to take those small chunks over and over and over again and be patient? And that's the thing that is so impressive about the type of quarterback Patrick Mahomes is now. He's willing to play like that all day. He doesn't need to step outside of himself. It's about making the right play consistently every single time. And who blinks first in that matchup? That's the thing about this game that I just can't really stop thinking about.
It's, we kind of say this with defensive play callers a lot, like the idea of emotional blitzing. Like, when the offense is doing something to you and you're like, you just don't want to play this way, so we're going to blitz our way out of it. The flip side of that is like, with offenses, you don't want to have to win 5 yards at a time. The Chiefs are so good. They've won so many games. They've won so many types of ways that they're like, actually, this is fine. Like, we could probably get away with this.
Something you mentioned on the previous show today that I want to revisit is the idea of Saquon Barkley in this moment. And obviously, he's been such a driving force for what the Eagles' offense has been all year. But it's about more than just him. I can't remember going into a Super Bowl, and I guess McCaffrey was sort of like this, but that offense was such a machine that all the component parts, I think, we considered it more, like, it was more than the sum of the parts individually. What Saquon has been is kind of the engine behind this offense. I can't remember a running game and a running back being such a central figure in how a game could go. The fact that that might be the most exciting aspect of this. And if that can be the thing that lifts the Eagles up over the top, we haven't really seen that recently, where a running back becomes the defining piece in a game like this. And I do think that Saquon has a chance to do that.
He really does. Like, think about a lot of the other Super Bowl winning running backs. It's obviously you're cheating when it's the Chiefs because they could literally put anybody there because you have Patrick Mahomes. But a number of those guys are not like big ticket names. C.J. Anderson winning it with the Broncos. Like, it's more typical that you'll get that kind of running back than the superstar like Saquon Barkley. But what we've seen him put together this year, it might change our framing at least a little bit, not fully where every team needs a superstar running back, but it might open us up to the idea that this is a way to build a really high-functioning offense, especially in a league where passing explosives are a little bit harder to come by. If you can find a running back like Saquon Barkley who can unlock that for you, it really, really goes a long way. And for him to do that, coming off of 4 or 5 years where we knew he was good, but it just felt like there were a lot of what-ifs, and what if we never get to see the best of Saquon Barkley? To see that potentially capped off with a ring, it would just be incredibly fulfilling obviously for him, but even for everyone who's watched him for the past 5 years.
The running game and what Saquon has provided the running game is an element of this Eagles offense that feels different than it has over the last couple of years. Another thing they've really improved on and kind of pulled out of the tailspin we saw them at the end of last season is what they've done against the blitz. And I think ultimately that's what this game is going to come down to. Can Jalen Hurts handle the ways that Steve Spagnuolo is going to try to heat him up? I think the Eagles are better equipped to deal with it than they have been at any point in the Sirianni-Hurts kind of partnership at the center of this. But the Chiefs are just a different beast. And the way that he's going to come after you, whether it's the zone they play behind it or sending more perimeter blitzes with corners rather than the linebacker stuff we've seen from teams like Washington, I just think it's such a unique sort of challenge that is really well positioned to give the Eagles trouble. Whether they can overcome that, I think, is probably going to be the defining characteristic of this game.
That's such a good way to frame the conversation because I think a lot of us are going to look at this and say, okay, well, the Eagles lost last time. Jalen Hurts, to this point in his career, had not been very good against the blitz at all, and he's better this year, and Spags obviously likes to throw a lot of that stuff. So if you just start to put 1 and 2 and 3 together, it's like, okay, you see how this formula is supposed to work. To me, it's just like, is it really enough? Like, the Eagles are better against the blitz, but you're facing one of the best defensive play callers we've seen of this generation with a defense that is playing at a really high level. I know they had that small dip towards the end of the year, like late November, early December, but over the past 2 years, this Chiefs defense has been fantastic and considerably better than they were in that year that they beat the Eagles in 2022. So I think that's important. And, like, I'm trying to gauge myself of, like, the Eagles are better. Is it really enough? I probably fall towards the side of I'm not quite sure it's enough.
We've talked about this a little bit over the last couple of weeks, just this idea of having a superstar pass rusher, and often in the interior, and just how you feel those guys in a different way when we get into the postseason, into the most important games of the season. And we have 2 of those guys in this game. And I think that Jalen Carter's ascension from being, he was really good as a rookie, he's an intriguing piece, let's see what he can do down the road. Him going from that thing to one of the best defensive players in the league, and you having Chris Jones on the other side. Which interior pass rusher has the bigger day? Which guy can wreck more of the game? I think that's also one of those things that, however that lands, I think it's going to go a long way in determining how this goes.
I think it really could because both of those guys have proven that they've already done it either late this season or in this postseason where they have been the one that definitively ended the game. And I think with obviously the Eagles or the Chiefs having to shake up how their interior works a little bit with moving Tooney to the left side, there's a chance that Carter just kind of has a day against these guys. And obviously Patrick Mahomes fantastic even when some of that stuff happens, but if you get to him 8 times, eventually you can assume that a mistake is going to happen.
Before we get to the game this weekend, we have a bunch of season-long awards to hand out at NFL Honors tonight. One of the other things that will be happening at NFL Honors is the 2025 Hall of Fame class is going to be announced. Somebody that might be a part of that announcement is former Giants quarterback Eli Manning. He talked to our own Zach Kiefer earlier today. Let's get to that conversation right now.
Welcome to the Toyota studio here with former Giants quarterback Eli Manning. Eli, good to be back in your hometown for the Super Bowl.
Always great to be back in New Orleans. Good to stay with my parents this week, and my mom was up this morning offering to cook me breakfast. So exciting week, and glad to be here.
Nothing better. I got to ask, you've essentially pitched 2 perfect games in 2 Super Bowls. When this week rolls around every year, is it just a flood of great memories from those 2 games?
Definitely, and it's been fun this past week. Saw a lot of highlights from those games. The David Tyree catch, the Plaxico Burress touchdown, the Manningham catch down the sideline. So it's great to reminisce about those plays, but also being here this week, you get to see a lot of old teammates. Sean O'Hara, Chris Canty, I've already seen just today, but I'll assume I'll see a lot more, a lot of great hugs and memories, just celebrating those championships with those guys.
You probably never get tired of talking about those games and those runs. If you had to right now, could you spit out the play call for the David Tyree catch and or the Manningham catch?
Yeah, David Tyree would just be half right, 76 Union Y sail, and then the Manningham would be, 9 slot wide, 81 key otter, W go.
That's impressive. So in Indianapolis, Peyton was known for being a prankster. Everybody on the team knew about it. Everybody got it. Did you ever prank Tom Coughlin? Or was that something that nobody crossed that line?
Yeah, you're not going to mess with Coach Coughlin,
Really?
I don't think. You don't want to prank him too much. So he was a. I don't know if he would see the humor in it. Sometimes you want to prank people where like afterwards they're like, oh, that's pretty good, that's pretty funny. And if you would have had went up into his office, got his cell phone, put it in like the team meeting room, like in the podium when he's going to talk, and then called it and it went off. Like, that'd be pretty funny. He hated cell phones, hated them. If they ever went off, that's like a big fine. That's like, $1,000 right there in the spot. And I thought about it many years of doing that, and I was just like, I don't think he would be funny, and I think I would get fined over this somehow. So I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do it.
Even after 2 Super Bowls, probably best to stay away?
Stay away. He was all business, especially in season. All season, you could have fun with them, and you saw the lighter side of Coach Coughlin. I still do a lot of work with them on some charity initiatives that we align on and have a lot of fun. But when it comes to being on time and, you can't mess with Coach too much.
So you just mentioned the play calls from those 2 memorable Super Bowl plays. I wonder, in a Super Bowl or not, was there ever a play where it just unfolded the wrong way, you made the wrong decision, and it worked out great?
Yeah, there's definitely plays that go on where, hey, you misread a coverage, you see something, you made the wrong check, and it just kind of worked out. I can't think of any in the Super Bowl, but definitely have a couple of plays where, hey, I checked to a run and we got to, they fake me out. They have a guy like blitzing off the edge. I'm checking to a run. I'm thinking one versus Dallas in 2011. We got to win the final game at home to make the playoffs. We're both kind of going for a spot right there, and I checked to a run to the weak side to Ahmad Bradshaw. They blitz the safety off the edge. They should tackle him for 5 yards. Instead, he breaks that tackle. He goes in for the touchdown. We eventually win the game. So it's one of those in the meetings the next day they're like, that's a minus, but a great play. Ahmad,
Right.
He bailed you out on that one.
Right.
So sometimes you need your players to bail you out.
That's the fun part. What is this week like for players that the fans, the media don't see? Because it's a different week, right? They're here for an entire week. You're sleeping in a hotel room. There's got to be parts of it that are a little bit different than a regular week.
Oh, it's very different than a regular week, and it can be difficult for the players. Just for the last 22 weeks, you've been on a tight schedule. Like every day is the same in the NFL. Your practice weeks. I mean, the only difference is whether you play on a Monday night or a Thursday night. And really, the Monday night's the same. It's just you move everything back one day. You get an extra off day. The Thursday night's a little different, but it's hard. All of a sudden, these players, they're in a hotel. They're taking buses to practice. They're not in their normal meeting space. They don't have their meeting room and all the film they can watch and everything at their disposal. They have different food that they're eating every week. They're not home with their families. So I think it's important for them to try to keep everything as similar as possible. If you got a massage on Wednesdays, get your massage on Wednesday. If you go to dinner with your lineman on Thursday, get that. If you eat a certain food on Saturday night, arrange. You got to plan ahead a little bit more to arrange those things so it stays the same.
So some of the other finalists for this year's Hall of Fame class: Antonio Gates, Luke Kuechly, Torrey Holt, Darren Woodson. I think that Gates and Kuechly feel like no-brainers to me. I assume they'll get in. But the question I wanted to ask you, as we look forward to even next year's class, who should be in the 2025 Hall of Fame class in your mind?
When I'm looking at kind of the rest of the list of the finalists here, there's a lot of guys who are close to me, but I couldn't make a great argument. Funny enough, the other two that I thought actually had a pretty good argument were Jari Evans and Marshall Yanda, which I understand I'm speaking your language. This is right up your alley. But those are probably, to me, the two that have the best argument.
There are 9 guards in the Hall of Fame. We've been playing football and NFL football for 100 years. How are there 9 guards in the Hall of Fame in 100 years?
Especially when you consider early on in the sport, all we were doing was running behind the guards.
I can't get behind it. And it really is telling that there are so few guys from that position. It's a really, really high bar to get into the Hall of Fame as an interior offensive lineman. I think those guys clear the bar. They're both on the all-decade team from the 2010s. Marshall Yanda is a 7-time first or second team All-Pro. Jari Evans was a first-team All-Pro 4 years in a row. Yanda, if you look at those offenses, and the Ravens changed offensively their identity so many different times over the course of his career. You know, there was a stretch where they ran like a Kubiak offense, and it was all zone-based, and Justin Forsett had that incredible year. And then they changed everything again in that 18-19 stretch. And I felt like having Yanda at the center of all of that really allowed some of that flexibility on offense. And he was such a dominant player when I started covering the league. I remember him having like actual highlights as an interior offensive lineman, which is just absolutely wild. I wrote a story about Marshall. It's probably been almost 10 years now, and just got to sit with him and talk about how he thinks about the game and just, you know, working with different offensive linemen and just like the chemistry that, you know, they built on those units. And I just felt like he was such a special player. And Jari Evans, I think you could make a really serious argument that he helped define what those Saints teams were. Those Saints teams went out of their way to get these big hulking guards that they could just sit there and protect the integrity of the pocket because of how Drew Brees was built. So you had Jari Evans, you had Carl Nix, these mountains of men that all we needed to do was keep our 5'11 quarterback clean, and he could do the rest. That doesn't work if you don't have pieces like Jari Evans. So it's not even just what these guys were individually. I think it's the way they fueled two of really the defining franchises of the 2010s.
And the Evans one is kind of instructive. I'm going to bring this back to modern NFL. You've talked about a number of times in the show. If you watch Ben Johnson's offense, there's a lot of Sean Payton in there. And obviously Jari Evans was a guard. But look at one of the first guys the Lions went out and made sure they got was Penei Sewell. They made sure they had a weapon on the offensive line. And for the Saints for a long time, it was Jari Evans. And for the Lions, it has been Penei Sewell. And honestly, Frank Ragnow to a different degree. But I think the fact that you can see shared DNA in those offenses and shared DNA in the way that those offensive linemen played, I think there's something to that. So I think him being a defining piece of their offense, it's a great point.
One position where it's been a little bit cluttered over the last few years and guys have had to wait a little while is receiver. If you look at guys like Reggie Wayne, Torrey Holt, and I feel like the way that we're choosing which receivers get into the Hall of Fame, I understand it and I think I support it. Like, if you think about how quickly Andre Johnson got in compared to guys like Torrey Holt and Reggie Wayne, it feels like your prominence within your offense is almost as important as your overall stat line over the course of your career. I mean, Reggie Wayne and Torrey Holt are guys that have about 14,000 receiving yards in a way that Andre Johnson does as well. But with Andre Johnson, it was immediate. And I think for receivers specifically, there's been this kind of barometer of when you close your eyes and you think about that guy, is that guy a Hall of Famer? And so the fact that we've had to wait a little while for these number 2 options on prolific offenses to get in, I understand it's probably frustrating for them and for fans of those teams, but I actually get that that's the sequence that we're going by when it comes to receivers specifically.
It kind of has to be, because I think if you think about it, even dating back before we got into all these offenses that were running 11 personnel and stuff like that, you still had almost every offense putting 2 receivers on the field. So you, at the very minimum, the bar you need to clear is I'm the best guy on my team by a long shot. I mean, Reggie Wayne is in this class, and Reggie Wayne had a fantastic career. When you're playing next to Marvin Harrison the entire time, it's hard to really shine and really look like you're a Hall of Fame player. So I've really struggled with a lot of receivers pretty much the entire time, and I don't think there was a receiver on this list that I could quite get myself over the line with.
So the Andre Johnson test, you close your eyes, is that guy Hall of Famer? I think the answer is automatically a yes. You said something earlier today that I found shocking, in that if we're doing that test about Steve Smith, your answer is no. I very rarely give you a hard time for generational gaps or just, the fact that you were a little bit younger when some of these guys played. The fact that you did not watch the 2005 Steve Smith season, I think, is the biggest indication of why you land in this spot. As somebody who watched that playoff game and what he did to that Bears defense and what he could do as the number 1 receiver on a team with Jake Delhomme at quarterback, it's an unacceptable stance for you to have.
I really think that is the bar, because here's the thing. I was 8 when that game happened. There are some things I can remember from around that time. Steve Smith's dominance, unfortunately, was not one of them. Steve Smith, in my mind, is like 09 to the end of his career, which is like right before Cam gets there. Then he has a great time with Cam, and then he has a honestly pretty nice little tail end to his career with the Ravens. That to me is Steve Smith, which was a really, really awesome player, and obviously I understood some of what he did before that, but it was just like, maybe it's I just missed a 3-year period where I would have put him on the Hall of Fame, but for me, I couldn't quite get there.
He had 1,400 yards as a 32-year-old in 2011 with Cam Newton, and you can't appreciate this?
Listen, as the Cam Newton enjoyer, I really should appreciate it more than I do, but it's like you said, the close your eyes test. When I close my eyes and imagine what the Hall of Fame receivers are, he's probably about as close as it gets without getting there, but to me, it didn't quite cross.
How old were you in 2005?
8.
Okay.
Here's the other thing. I think the difference maybe between me and us. My bar for what I really appreciate out of receivers is like significantly higher. Yeah.
Speaking of
I just don't like the receivers.
Speaking of productive receivers, I actually had a conversation with Puka Nacua earlier this week here at the Toyota studio. Let's get to that discussion with Puka right now. You mentioned Cooper. You joked on Twitter this week that you thought it was NBA trade season. When you hear that he comes out and says it's very likely that I'm going to be traded this offseason, what's your initial reaction to that?
Definitely a little bit of confusion. I think I've been blessed to be able to run to Cooper for these past 2 years, and he's been nothing but a mentor to me, and to be able to teach me everything that he feel like is necessary for the success in this game of football. I'm still trying to learn some of the X's and O's that he's so detailed on. But being able to be with him in the offseason last year and to be out watching him as he prepares throughout the season for these past 2 years, you watch somebody who's detail-oriented, like who's paying attention to the small details, and the captain and leader of our team, somebody who communicates so well. So it's been so exciting and such a blessing to be able to be behind him.
When you watch tape with him, what are things he's noticing that maybe you wouldn't be able to at this stage of your career?
Yeah, I think some of that, man, we're watching just the run cut-ups, and I'm looking at the receivers and how they're getting attached to the DBs or the safeties or where the rotation is happening. And he's like, man, the combination didn't get through to the backer right there. And I'm like, wait, what are you talking about? He's like, look at these guys right here in the O-line. And I'm like, dude, I'm looking out by the numbers where we're at, man. I'm looking and he's like, that's not where the action is at. And then in the pass concept and doing the same thing and understanding where certain runs are supposed to hit and how defenses and when we motion and how the defense is responding. I'm just looking at, man, I'm trying to make sure my motion landmarks are the right and how I'm moving on the football field is precise, but he's being able to do that and then look at other people and making sure that they're in the right spot. So I'm like, man, my view of football is still kind of 1/11th of what's going on.
I mean, back in the day, like 2017, 2018, they actually had him like doing combos with the tackle and some of those things. So the fact that the offense has evolved past that is probably a good thing for you at this stage of your career. And I think in a lot of ways, he's kind of been an expression of what the Rams have been over the last 7 years, right? 2017, 2018, they can live in 11 because he's almost an extra tight end. Matthew gets there, it spreads out a little bit, he wins the Triple Crown. Can you imagine what the Rams with Sean McVay are without Cooper Kupp?
I guess it's still kind of too fresh to kind of think about, but I think of the standards that he set in the receiver room and in the offense of to be an extra receiver, to feel like we're in 11 personnel because we block and we're getting the right guys and we're getting attached and we understand where the runs are going and how to impact the run game as a wide receiver who's not touching the ball, but then also when you see Matthew come out there and you see us be able to spread it out and it feels like we're throwing the ball 50 times to still be an attacking threat on the offensive side of the ball as a receiver. It just, Cooper Kupp epitomizes all of those things as a wide receiver, and especially he set the standard in the receiver room, and that's what we're looking for.
This is going to seem like a strange question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Does your mom enjoy watching your games?
Yeah, she does. Why?
The reason that I ask that is because when I'm watching you play, I find myself wincing. Like, the amount of pure punishment you take as a receiver is just different than a lot of the guys who play the position, whether you're digging out safeties, whether you're running the ball. Some of the landings you had this year on, like, contested catches on the sideline, having someone who cares about you watch you play that way, I can't imagine how stressful that is.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, like, what is her actual experience when she watches you play?
Yeah, I feel like for the most part, it is joy and excitement. My mom, she may not know all the rules to football, but she definitely has been watching it long enough with all of my brothers and to know what are the key moments. And she always does come with the post-game report of how she thought it went down. But no, there normally isn't anything of that. She definitely does ask how I'm feeling after. She knows I take some beatings, but there are nobody like, man, are you feeling okay? She's like, hey, you better start your treatment process.
Working with Sean over the last couple of years, what have you come to appreciate just about the way that he sees the game? Somebody that from the outside that doesn't work with him every day just really wouldn't understand.
I guess there is just a little bit of crazy that you need for sure. Somebody who loves the game of football and the passion that he has, it comes out, and it's so exciting to be in that room with him and have those conversations because you feel that as a player and you understand that, man, he's trying to do everything he can to put you in the best situation to succeed, and his level of communication provides that clarity to be able to go out there and do what is needed, and makes it so fun because I know why I'm lined up in the certain spots I am. I know how we're trying to attack the defense here, and the reason is there, so it makes being able to go out there and do it with excitement that much more capable of doing that.
If you could steal one trait from another receiver in the league, who would it be and why?
Give me Xavier Worthy for sure, or Tyreek Hill. Let me run 4.2 with waking up right out of bed and phew, out of there.
Everybody's been saying that.
Yeah,
Everybody wants to be a little bit faster.
Yeah.
We're good. We're working on the fly here. I'm dropping stuff. This is live, folks. This is live. All right, so we talked to Puka about what trait he would steal from any receiver in the league. I want to take this a little bit wider and talk about which receiver you would pick if you were starting an offense right now. This is a veiled attempt to make you pick between two guys, and I'm very curious who your pick would be.
I think, obviously, when you hinted at that two guys, it's Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase. Those are probably, to most people, the two guys. I think you could probably throw A.J. Brown in the conversation if you wanted, but those are like really the three that you almost certainly have to start with. To me, it almost comes down to more of how do you view the game and like what is the thing that you want to build your receiver room around. To me, football at its core is what do you do with the ball in your hands and how scary are you with the ball in your hands, and everything about offense is trying to get to that point. To me, Jamar Chase is the scariest player at the position in the league with the ball in his hands. And so I think I would want to build my offense around that guy. And what's interesting is I think a year ago and certainly 2 years ago, I'm not sure I would have said that because we hadn't really seen Jamar Chase work out of the slot that much. Whereas Jefferson, we've seen him work in and out. I think now that we've seen proof of concept with Chase from the slot, him being a pretty unique threat with the ball in his hands, still being a fantastic vertical threat, and being a considerably better route runner than I think people realize, he has my heart the way that he plays.
This season has made me rethink it, and it's just because of when you're watching him play, he's just such a force of nature compared to almost any other player in the league. That there is nobody else in the NFL that is more capable of going 13 for 250 and 2 in any given game than Jamar Chase is. The way that I always thought about it, and this is a silly way to conceive of it, but fantasy football. Like, there is nobody that is scarier to be playing against on the other side in any given fantasy matchup than Jamar Chase, because any single week he could go for 45 and your week is over. Like, it doesn't matter. Whatever else happens is completely inconsequential because you played against Jamar Chase. So I think this season really hammered that home, just how different he feels when you're watching the game. I still have to go with Jefferson, though, and it's because I have such a soft spot for somebody with the route running mechanics that he brings to the position. The way that he moves is just so different than anybody else. I did a story, it's probably been 4 or 5 years ago now, where I was talking about how his body type and the way that he actually moves on the field drives what's so difficult about covering him. And I made him stand up next to me because I wanted to see where his hip bone was compared to mine. So Justin Jefferson, I think a lot of people would think he's 6'2", 6'3", because he is a little bit longer. He's only 6'1", but his hip, I'm 5'11", was about 4 inches higher than mine. So his legs are just so long, but his center of gravity is actually a lot lower than you would think. So what that means is he can just chew up all of this space and get on corners, but when it comes to changing direction, he can change direction like a 6'1" receiver. And it just, the way that I thought about it, and Patrick Peterson said this to me when I was at Vikings training camp that year, it's like his body just lies to you. And so I think that because he's built in such a strange way and moves in a way that people aren't used to, he's just able to manipulate defensive backs in a way that very few guys are. And I think that part of it really drives a lot of it home. But the other thing I feel like he has even an advantage over Chase, the contested catch stuff with Jefferson is, in my opinion, the most underrated part of his game. Like his ability to go up and get the ball in some of these tight window moments, it's different than it is with a lot of other elite receivers. Like he brings a physicality to the position that I don't think he gets enough credit for because he's wearing a chain and like he's a superstar. He doesn't play like a superstar receiver with a negative connotation of that.
And it's to me, it's not just the physicality, because if it was just the physicality, I would probably call that a wash, or if anything, maybe give it to Chase. It's Jefferson's ball tracking that is like pretty unique to him, and
he'll go get it,
and he will go get it. And like Chase is good on the sideline, his awareness is good, all that stuff, but Jefferson's ability to just know exactly where he is on the field, where the ball is, how the flight of the ball is coming to him, where the defenders are, his ability to just take in all of that information in a quarter of a second and just pluck the ball out of the air is pretty unique. I think everything that you've said about Jefferson and what I said about Chase, I actually had a friend, I was kind of having this conversation with a friend maybe a couple weeks ago, and the way he kind of explained it to me, and I actually loved it, it's, do you want the best wide receiver, or do you want the best football player who happens to be playing wide receiver? And to me, Jamar Chase is the best football player who happens to play wide receiver, and there's just something about the way that his game works that I appreciate a little bit more in that way.
My favorite thing about these conversations, and I think this is an indication that it's a good debate, if the Bengals called the Vikings right now and said, we'll trade you Jamar Chase for Justin Jefferson, the Vikings would say no. And if the Vikings called the Bengals right now and said, we'll trade you Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, the Bengals would say no. And that's how you know that it's close. And earlier this season, I was talking about this with an offensive coordinator, and we were having this discussion because his team had just played the Vikings. And I was like, oh, man, watching that guy, he's like, in our building, we had like an hour-long discussion about which one you would take. And a lot of the scout types wanted Jamar Chase, and a lot of the guys building an offense wanted Justin Jefferson, which I think is very telling. It's like the pure force of nature, physical talent wins out when you're somebody who's evaluating players for a living.
Because that's the whole thing. What is the old scouting adage? It's traits over production, and it's traits over all this stuff. And so Jamar Chase has to, when you build a receiver in a lab, that's what it looks like. He looks like that guy. And that was the whole discussion. I mean, shoot, he only played college football basically as an 18, 19-year-old and then left because he sat out the COVID season and all that stuff. So I think the point you make about, would either team trade for the other guy? No, absolutely not.
The Dolphins have plenty of wide receiver talent on that roster. They also have an excellent left tackle who mostly stayed healthy this year, had a really good season, probably one of the best of his career. Terron Armstead has been a mainstay for some really good offenses in the NFL over the last decade or so. And our own Diana Rossini chatted with Terron earlier today at the Toyota studio. Let's get to that discussion right now.
When you were here, too, just the teams you were on were special themselves as well.
Yeah, we were pretty good.
I know you're not at that point yet in your life where you're doing tons of reflection, but it's hard not to think about there was something special brewing all the time there, and you guys were winning.
Yeah,
You had some really good seasons here.
For sure.
So with those, do you still stay in touch with a lot of those guys from the Saints team?
Oh yeah, Mark Ingram, Cam, you know, Marcus Williams, AK, Cesar Ruiz. I'm staying at his house. You know what I mean? So all those guys, my brothers for life. Being here for 9 years, winning a lot of games, the ups and downs. It's really a travesty that we didn't get a chance to compete for a Super Bowl with the teams that we had here, and
so close.
Success.
They make that call. You're in.
All right, let's not even go there. That'll change my whole day.
I'm sorry. You know what's funny? I was thinking about this the other day. That was the last time I was in New Orleans.
Really?
And I don't think I've ever covered a game where the post-game feeling here just absolutely crushed the city as a whole. Like, just the oxygen was just sucked out of the Superdome in such an awful way. And I still don't think Sean Payton ever got over that. Like, I still think he thinks about that moment.
No, for sure.
You know?
I mean, you have to. That's a low that you cannot. You never want to feel again. Never want to replicate. Like, just you think back and you reflect on it now. How life-changing that is if we get a Super Bowl berth there. Mm-hmm. How many people's lives change? Literally, their timeline.
The domino
would change.
effect
of
a win.
Sure.
If you guys get in, if that call's made.
Yeah.
And you're right. It changes the roster. It changes contracts. It changes
everything.
Who knows who goes where. It's like a butterfly effect of things.
And we had a Tom Brady, Drew Brees moment that we could have had. You know what I mean? Like that it takes away so much of history, and it's hard to deal with. Like it's very painful still. I'll never get over it. What
was that like for you guys when Tua wanted to come back? Like, what a hard decision he had to make.
It actually wasn't for him.
Yeah.
Like, at all.
Yeah.
It wasn't. He never thought twice about it. So, really, at that point, like, all right, we're doing it. You know what I mean? Like, he's coming back. The level of improvement, like, his growth and development during his time that he was out was incredible. Yeah. It was. He popped into every position room. He got a deeper understanding of O-line play and protections. He got a deeper understanding of wide receiver depths and timing. He got a deeper understanding of running back protection and outlets for hots. And he really submerged himself more into the offense. And that's been the trajectory of his career. We've looked at Tua's only gotten better since he's still scratching the surface. I'm a huge fan. I love the guy.
Yeah. Coming up for this Sunday's game, right? You have two teams with just tremendous offensive lines. Yeah. Obviously, Philly prides himself on it, and they've done such a good job about not revamping, but retooling it, right? With losing Jason Kelsey. Just in terms of seeing this matchup, where do you think, in terms of the O-line play, which team's got kind of the nod, the advantage?
It's tough. It's tough to say. I think across the board, Philly is they're pretty rock solid, and have been consistent and consistently with each other, so they have a cohesiveness and a chemistry that not many teams can replicate. Yeah. Kansas City has some continuity up front too. That left tackle position has been a bit of a
back and forth a bit. They've been trying different things.
Yeah. So Joe Thuney's been out there and he's been playing incredible for sure. I know he would love to be back at left guard where he feels home. But I think just across the board, roster to roster, these teams are very evenly matched. I think this game will come down to the turnover battle, like most playoff games do, but I think this one more than any.
We always just immediately, when I say we, people in the media, we always just kind of anoint like Trent Williams as like the best offensive lineman. Yeah. And even at his age, he's still playing at such a high level. Who do you think is the future best? Like who out there makes you go, oh, this guy's gonna be a dog, or he's good?
Yeah. We have a ton. We have a ton of them. I love the direction and the outlook of the position, the tackle position. We got some guys. I mean, Tristan Wirfs he's been in the league for some years now, but he's still super young. Yeah. Penay's a dog. Mm-hmm. He's a dog. I enjoy watching him play.
So Terron was talking to Diana about that 2018 Saints team, the one that lost on the Nickel Roby play. I was trying to find who was the corner that didn't get called for that. It was Nickel Roby. I remember where I was when I watched that game. I was at Arrowhead preparing for the AFC Championship game, and we're all sitting there in the club level where the press box is, and everyone's just losing their minds about what that play was. And I think we all kind of understood, like, things are never going to be the same. Like, they're going to have a long conversation about how we can avoid this again, and then somehow we've forgotten it. And I think that's in part because these teams are just lost to history. So along with that 2018 Saints team, I'm wondering, as you look back at playoff history, who is your biggest what-if team that if they had pulled it off, like Terron was saying, it kind of changes the direction and the trajectory of all of those guys involved?
I think anyone who has talked to me over the past 12 years might know where I'm going. That 2015 Cam Newton Carolina Panthers season,
I should have known.
That season should be immortalized in history. It is the most 1 versus 21 quarterback season we have ever seen. And the fact that they just couldn't quite get it over the finish line against, it took maybe the best defense I've seen in my life to beat him, by the way, which further goes into the point of how insane what he was doing was. But that to me was the team where I just thought what Cam Newton was doing was so special. They had so many awesome players on that defense. What would that have done for Luke Kuechly's legacy? Not that he really needed it because he was incredible, but just one more thing that would have really solidified it for him. There were just a lot of really memorable players on that team for me, and I think that 2015 season not quite getting the final crown jewel, it hurts. It hurts.
It's worth just listing off this group of names, and I'm going to do it for you right now. Greg Olsen led that 2015 Panthers team in targets. He had 124 of them. He had 77 catches for 1,100 yards. After that, we have Ted Ginn, who got 97.
Absurd number.
97 targets, 44 catches on those 97 targets. So less than a 50% catch rate for Ted Ginn, which when you think about how he was used, I understand that, but it still is very funny. Devin Funchess had 31 catches on that team. Jericho Cotchery had 39 catches on that team. Philly Brown finishes with 31 catches on 54 targets for 447 yards. That's the group of pass catchers we're talking about with an MVP quarterback who finished that season with 35 passing touchdowns.
I think if you asked me to name the top 5 target getters for any team in NFL history, that would be the one I'm most likely to get because of how much I really thought Cam had something. And I look at that list of names and I'm like, there's no way that this happened.
You talk about that defense that season. I was at that Super Bowl and they were just such a force. I mean, their ability to just rush 5 and play man coverage behind it with Vaughn, DeMarcus Ware, and Derek Wolfe and Malik Jackson, it was remarkable. I'm going the following season, though. That 2016 Falcons team has such a special place in my heart. I was working at the Ringer at the time, and halfway through that season, we had to pick who we thought was going to win the Super Bowl. And I want to say that Falcons team at that point was 4-4. I mean, they weren't that great over the first half of the year, even though the offense was very good.
Because the defense wasn't very good.
Yes. And so I was sitting there watching that team, and I'm like, I just think that they can turn it into nuclear mode in the second half of the year. And that's exactly what happened. And Matt Ryan was discussing this on some show earlier this week. I'm sorry for not remembering which it was, but he was talking about how much history changes when you're playing at the same time as one of these dynasties. And how for a lot of NFL history, it's this guy's turn this year. It's this guy's turn this year. And because of Brady and Mahomes, that's kind of gone away. And if Dante Hightower gets blocked by Devontae Freeman, we're having a very different discussion about Matt Ryan, Dan Quinn, Kyle Shanahan. Imagine if Kyle Shanahan had won the Super Bowl and then gone to San Francisco. So many of the late game issues and the big game issues that he's had wouldn't matter because he already would have exercised some of that stuff in Atlanta before he even got the job. So that offense and that team and that game, that's the one that I just can't get over when you look at those what-if moments.
I'll dig in even further a little bit on that Atlanta team. A forgotten play. The Julio catch that he makes on the sideline, it's one of the most impressive feats of human ability that I've ever seen, that he is able to make that play. And it kind of embodies, to me, why and how this team is going to get forgotten. They are one of the coolest, most explosive, at the time felt kind of unique offenses in the entire NFL. And it kind of just got all washed away by, like you said, we used to have this time in the NFL where it could be it could be their year, it could be their time. They could have a little 2-year stretch. Because of Brady and Mahomes, so many of these guys that were otherwise great just kind of get washed away. And that 2016 Falcons team certainly did. And you still see the remnants of all of those guys that are still in the league now, like Dan Quinn still being in the league and doing great things. Kyle Shanahan, like Matt Ryan, had still a really good run after that. Julio Jones was still fantastic for a while. So it was clearly an awesome team that just, again, sometimes when you run into Brady, what can you do?
And not only that 2018 Saints team, the 2017 Saints team, I was at the Minneapolis Miracle game. So you have 2 straight years where you just lose in the playoffs in heartbreaking fashion with arguably the best team in the league. Like, you could make a really strong case that the Saints were the best team in the NFL during that 2-year stretch, and they come away with not a single even Super Bowl appearance, let alone a Super Bowl win.
Drew Brees was like setting completion records during like this time. Like they were awesome during that period. Also, what's funny, have you noticed that we've only picked NFC South teams here? Talking about Terron Armstead Saints. I picked the Panthers. You picked the Falcons. We need like a Bucks moment to really get thrown in here.
Somebody in the chat, Chris Smith, mentioned the Andy Dalton broken thumb team in 2015.
That's a great one.
That's an incredible one. I legitimately thought that team was going to win the Super Bowl. Their offense was electric. Marvin Jones was like a great number 2 receiver on that team with A.J. Green. Their offensive line was really good. That was like the best Geno Atkins season. I really, really loved watching that Bengals team. And you could make a really solid argument. I wrote this for Sports Illustrated at the time, that Andy Dalton had an MVP case halfway through that season. He breaks his thumb. It all goes off the rails. And Beller's in my ear talking about A.J. McCarron. It's,
Oh, my God.
Andy Dalton breaking his thumb and like that sliding doors moment for that Bengals team. It really is a heartbreaking one because I legitimately think they could have won the Super Bowl that year.
Especially, too, like, quarterback is obviously the position we talk so much about legacy and stuff like that. Not that, like, Andy Dalton really had a shot at being a Hall of Famer, but Andy Dalton never really got close to those heights again. Like, imagine how different it would have gone if they could have made a run for him and just, like, how different we might have talked about him.
Last moment we wanted to hit from Radio Row today, Diana was talking to Will Anderson, and they just had a great exchange about Will Anderson's nickname, how he got it, and made me feel very old at the end of it. So let's get to that clip right now.
The nickname, the Terminator. Just give me the backstory here. Where is this coming from?
So that came from Steve Sarkisian. He's the head coach at the Texas right now.
Yep.
And my freshman year, he would call me that because I just be wrecking practice all the time.
You're so young, though. Do you even know what the Terminator is?
I still have not watched one Terminator movie yet.
You have a nickname of a movie from a show that you've never seen.
Never seen.
But you've seen pictures. Like
I've seen
you
pictures
get
of
like
it.
what it looks like. That,
Yeah, I've
the
seen
Arnold
pictures.
Schwarzenegger and the whole thing. I think you need to put that in your off-season plans, but in
Okay.
between a couple workouts to check it out because it is really good.
Okay, I'm gonna binge it this offseason.
Good, do it. And there's like 7 of them, so you can't. Maybe you'll get addicted. It could be something that you.
Before we get out of here today, we're going to get to some of your guys' comments from the chat. Sincerely appreciate everybody who spent the time with us today. First one, Name Schmame, says, what are some of the probable landing spots for Myles Garrett? And I actually want to just talk about the edge rusher market overall after we get to where Myles Garrett might make the most sense.
I mean, you know, we kind of talked about this a little bit with Diana the other day. I think the 2 spots when we were talking about it a little bit that made a ton of sense to me were Washington and the Chargers. And I think Washington, the reason I would say them, we talk so much about, like, the value of the rookie contract and all that stuff. I think when you are going into drafting a guy, that's not something you should be considering because you don't know if the guy's good or not yet.
Yeah.
What needs to happen is once you realize he's good, it's like, all right, we've got 2-3 years to really turn it up a notch. And I think Myles Garrett, being a pretty perfect fit for what Dan Quinn wants to do anyway, he wants to just let 4 and 5 guys rush after the passer. He's a perfect body type for the system. Let him get after it. So I think that would be a good fit. And then with the Chargers, almost certainly having to retool an aging edge group for them, I think if they could make a move to go get Myles Garrett, and they certainly have the money now to pay him whatever he wants, I think those 2 spots would be good. And Garrett, to me, too, the Chargers' defense was really sound this year. They didn't have enough oomph. They didn't have enough juice.
You say Myles Garrett has oomph?
More than anybody in the league on that side of the ball, I would say.
The team that I feel like would be fun just because they need a difference maker at that spot, I don't know if they can swing the price. I keep thinking about Buffalo and just dropping him onto Buffalo's defense. I think a move that is actually realistic for the Bills, though, and one that might make sense, and I think they could pull off. Trey Hendrickson earlier this week talking about that situation in Cincinnati and some of the roadblocks run into contract-wise. Duke Tobin, who's their de facto GM, had mentioned, we can't necessarily pay guys at the top of the market at every position, which is very silly. You're paying no defensive players, but Bengals. Buffalo calling Cincinnati and just saying, hey, we'll give you 2 for Trey Hendrickson. How do you feel about that? I'm interested. I am interested in what the Bills' defense looks like with a guy like Trey Hendrickson, and I do think that is the sort of thing they might need to kind of push them over the top as they think about how to handle the Chiefs next year.
I think that would be perfect. And I think it would kind of almost be a good storytelling of, like, where we've gotten with this defense. I think 3 years ago it was like, okay, their front is deep, but they don't really have enough of guys.
No
and I
ace.
think yeah, exactly. And we fast forward to this year, Rousseau is like close to that. He's not quite that level of guy. If you go get a guy like Trey Hendrickson, where he is very obviously that tier of player, pair him with a guy like Rousseau, who would be an insane 1B level player, their pass rush, it would really simplify Sean McDermott's job, and they wouldn't have to do maybe some of the stuff that he did have to work outside his comfort zone, I think, a little bit the past 2 years. I think if you get Trey Hendrickson in there to rush the passer, don't even need to do as much of that stuff.
Last comment here from Adam in the chat. He said, the Eagles need a B+ or better game from Jalen Hurts to win. I'm right there with him on that. I think that's exactly how I'm thinking about this game. If they can get a B+ game from Hurts, if he does not get shaken by whatever Spagnuolo is going to throw at him, I actually think the rest of the roster and the defense specifically is enough for the Eagles to get there.
I would even simplify it a little bit more. Over or under 2.5 sacks. If he's over 2.5 sacks, they lose the game. If he can find a way to get under 2.5 sacks, that to me says that like the way that the game was going and the way that he was playing probably means that they were able to win the game.
Under 2.5, I think, will count as a B+ or better game for
Yes,
Jalen
exactly.
Hurts. I think that's going to be a big thing. All right, that is all we've got. That will do it for The Athletic, live from the Toyota studio here at Radio Row in New Orleans. To everybody that tuned in, sincerely appreciate. Thank you for all of your comments. Thank you for being with us all week. We've got a really fun slate of guests tomorrow. Mike Sando is going to be here, who is a Hall of Fame voter. He's going to be talking about the Hall of Fame class and his thoughts maybe about next year's group. Bijan Robinson is going to be here tomorrow. And speaking of those 2018 Saints, Drew Brees is also going to be joining us tomorrow. It'll be me, Derek, and Diana back with you on Friday for the last live stream of the week. For now, that's all we got. Sincerely appreciate you guys spending the time with us. We'll talk to you very soon.